What's up everybody? Today I have 30 tips for you to master endgame. These tips are coming in no particular order and there's a lot of information in here for you, so make sure you stick around. Coming in at number 1, we have being quick. This means you need to be making your decisions quickly, and this is with any decision such as healing, rotating, boxing up, and going for tags. Tip number 2, be confident. This means when you make that decision, stick with it and execute. The best way to build confidence is by playing lots of rank and most importantly, getting into scrims. Tip number 3, create space. When it's time to box up, whether it's for a fight, for you to heal, or holding your position in zone, it's important that you have space and layers. You never want to be in the position where you're reliant on 4 walls to keep you protected. Tip number 4, if you pull zone, reinforce your spot. Usually you want to do this by going a couple extra layers high, but if you're on low ground, you do want to go a couple extra layers wide. Controlling a lot of space will make fighting much easier in the end game. Tip number 5, use refreshes to create lots of extra space. If you get a refresh on the early side of end game, it is important that you use those extra mats to create as much space as you can. No mats should go to waste. Tip number 6, pay attention to your mats once you get a refresh. It's very easy to get caught in the moment and run through a refresh without checking out what you picked up. But what you picked up could drastically change how you play the rest of the game out. Maybe you got great materials and can make a play on height, or maybe you barely got anything and you have to switch to low ground. Even the amount of ammo or heals you got could change how you should play the rest of the game. So remember to take a second to see what you got. Tip number 7, I call it 360 scouting. This is where you're checking all angles before you rotate. Now this doesn't have to take a long time and it doesn't have to be the most thorough scouting, but you want to get an idea of what's going on in the lobby. Who's on height, where are the majority of players, who's fighting, and who else is rotating. Getting this information will allow you to make the smoothest rotate possible. Tip number 8, also before rotating, you should be looking for lanes. Oftentimes during endgame, there are open lanes that you can take which will allow you to have a safe rotate. And a lane is just a space between a cluster of builds and fighting. Tip number 9, another huge part of being aware is looking up. Most of the fighting and chaos is gonna be in the low and mid ground area, and it's very easy to get too focused in on that, so it's important that you look up, whether you're on low ground, mid ground, or even on height, because somebody could still be above you or be trying to get above you. Tip number 10. Now this one might seem obvious, but it is a mistake that is commonly made. If you're low, heal before you rotate. It's easy to think that you're not going that far, so you'll just heal once you make the rotate. But if you have the heals, go ahead and heal before you rotate, because it's better to do that than die while trying to rotate and now you just wasted your game. This leads me to tip number 11. It's okay to stop on rotations. Sometimes while you're rotating, it's important that you stop to gather yourself. This could be to heal, check your mats, or very importantly, regaining your sprint. You definitely don't want to get caught lightly jogging into zone with tons of eyes on you. So next time you're rotating and you're out of sprint or things are getting too crazy for you, box up and take a quick break. Tip number 12, you need to be looking for tags while rotating. A lot of times people will rotate at the same time, and this could be the easiest time to pick up some free kills. It's not going to happen every time that you actually do get the kill, but sometimes you might end up running into a player that's pretty weak and only takes a couple of shots. But even if that player is weak, don't tunnel vision, which is exactly what my next tip is. Tip number 13, tunnel visioning is one of the easiest ways to have your game ended. You have a player literal one shot and you just want to get in this box and finish the job. Little do you know, 1, 2, or maybe even 3 or the whole lobby of players is looking at you. And as you're right there trying to finish the kill, you get focused. And because of that, you and that other player that you got low, both of your games are done. Remember, in these in-game situations, placement is definitely more important than kills, especially if it's just one. Tip number 14, it's okay to take damage. In every game, even if you're the best player, everybody is going to take damage. so get used to it. The best thing you can do is limit how much damage you take. You can do this by playing safe angles from your box, moving quickly and unpredictably on your rotates, and scouting for players who might be trying to target you while you rotate or while you're in your box. Tip number 15, be ready to rotate before a zone closes. As each zone closes, you should already have a plan for how you'll complete your next rotate. But it's important that you check your map and mark where you want to go. This way you can act fast and have the best chance at a clean rotate. Tip number 16, be on the lookout for dead builds. Dead builds are builds that are old and no longer being occupied or used. This can be used to your advantage when it comes to zones that pull backwards, and more importantly, if you're ever full shambles and you need some type of cover, dead builds are the place to go. Just make sure you're ready for the owner of those builds to come back, because that'll be your best chance at a refresh. Tip number 17, return fire. Returning fire is oftentimes the best way to get somebody to stop pressuring you. You don't want to just sit there and keep holding whatever it is that they're breaking. The number one reason for this is because you're wasting mats, but also you're risking yourself getting targeted from other people and taking damage from shots that bleed. But it's never a bad idea to create more space. Tip number 18. Another way to relieve the pressure of somebody targeting you is to literally get to that person and box on top of them. This is really only for close range spraying, and you want to get on top and to a side or 2 layers above. But this is definitely an underrated way to get somebody to stop spraying. Tip number 19. Mobility is a must-have. In this season where there's basically no mobility, it's very important that you carry fizz or berries. Fizz is going to be the top priority every time, but if berries is all you have, then you definitely should carry them. This will allow your end games to be played out so much easier, because you'll be able to rotate quicker and safer. And more importantly, you'll conserve a lot of mats. This leads me into tip number 20. For tip number 20, you need to be using the map's mobility. This includes launch pads, dashes, and even the nitro tunnels. It will be very helpful to box up on a launch pad that's in zone, preferably towards the center since that's where most zones will be pulled. But even better, try to keep a hold of some dashes, because these you can carry all the way through the end game. Just make sure to use them wisely. For tip number 21, you need to be boxing on a rift. If you don't do this already, you'd be very surprised at how easy boxing on a rift can make your end games. Rifts spawn around the island, which appears in zone 3, but there's not many of them, so try to get there as early as you can and box one up. Doing this will allow you to get the best form of rotation into the next zone, and a lot of times you won't even have to leave that spot until around zone 5. But once it appears, you can get the perfect positioning to start your end game. Tip number 22, don't be afraid of zone. Once you enter the later stages of the game, everybody knows that zone starts ticking for more damage, but if you ever get caught in storm, it's important to not panic. You must stay calm as you find your way back in. This will keep you from making mistakes or missing opportunities that could have got you in, which ultimately could really save your game. And with placement being so important this season, you might find yourself in a situation where it's actually better to stay in zone and heal than to force your way in and die earlier than you really should have. Tip number 23. Don't get thrown off your rotation plan just because you got shot at. Sometimes while you're rotating, especially if it's through the air, you'll find yourself being shot at by one or multiple players. Don't let this, or even being hit a few times, throw you off your rotation. If you were headed to a spot and you know it's good positioning, just get there and heal back up. It'll be more worth it to do that than to land somewhere completely unscouted that you were not ready to go, because doing that is the easiest way to become a free kill for someone else. Tip number 23. If you're on height, don't be so easy to give it up. I know sometimes somebody could catch you off guard in an attempt to take height, and sometimes they do look very intimidating, but chances are they're more nervous than you are. So just hold your ground and they'll probably end up backing off somewhat easily. Tip number 24. you have to be able to hold your own. In these end games, people are gonna try to press you and take your spot, but as long as you can hold your own, people will have no choice but to back off, because in these end games, there's not enough time to be fighting like that. And you never know, someone constantly pressuring you like that could be shambles, and that's why they're doing it. And if that's the case, chances are you have the advantage, whether it's in your health or mats. For tip number 25, we have rotating across height. Oftentimes, rotating across height is the safest, easiest, and most efficient way to rotate. This is going to be most effective if you can do it with Fizz or a berry. And in doing so, you'll see that it's way more open and less congested while you rotate. And the best part about this is you're set up for best positioning and height. For tip number 26, make sure you're using your ammo. Throughout the early game and mid game, you should be trying to stack up as much ammo as possible. This way, when it comes to end game, you can constantly pressure and spray and waste people's mats. This especially comes in handy if you're already on height. For tip number 27, during those really late game situations where the zone is very small and no longer pulling halves, pick a side of zone to stay on. This means every time a new zone starts, you need to be checking your map and choosing the left or right side and sticking to that side. This way, you eliminate a blind spot. For example, if you choose the very left edge of zone, you no longer have to worry about the left side because that side will be completely in the storm. The same goes for the right side. For tip number 28, this one is more towards building, and it's to learn protected 90s. Protected 90s in an end game can relieve you of being pressured by multiple people because you can go up and do it safely. And if you're consistent and fast enough, it can even help you to get height, also while being protected. They're also not really hard to learn, and I do have a video out already about how you can learn to do them. Tip number 29, practice your tunneling. During endgame, you need to be able to tunnel in any direction. This means being able to tunnel in a straight line, tunnel to the left, tunnel to the right, and even tunneling upwards. There are multiple ways to do tunnels. There are ways you can do it to get the most protection. There are ways to do it that really conserve your materials, but you have to know when to use what type of tunnel. And finally, for tip number 30, we have watching pro scrims. Watching pro scrims is the best way to learn how to navigate through the endgame. While watching, you want to be looking at their choice of positioning. You want to watch out for how they fight, and you also want to be looking at how they play low ground and how they play height. There's also lots of little things that you can watch out for. Just make sure when you're watching to improve and to learn. And here's a bonus tip. If you want to learn how to improve 10 times faster, click on the video above. Thanks for watching. See ya.